Right, so we've got some other options up the top here. As you can see, there's some other tables. So this is just our playback spot, but we can also go across the spectrum here, and this might give us a better indication with these filters as well. But we've got lots of options. So we've got some different display options. So at the moment, you got single. So we're seeing the single spectrum of each song. Or we can actually go across to dual and we'll get two individual displays of each song. So our DAW and our reference. Or we can layer it so we can get a really clear look at that. Now obviously that's very dynamic, very hard to sort of picture that, but we can change some plot options here. But let's just have another look at our filters just to see what we see on the graph here. Okay, so you can sort of see how it highlights it. So it's a little bit wrong with my idea there. So this one here is filtering out everything below the top end, the highest point. If we go over to here, you'll see it sets that to 4K. So we're filtering out the top end, playing all below 4K. And if we go in the mid, we're playing there. So depending on what we do with our setting. Okay, so you'll see that's playing only above the 4K there when I set it to mid, and that's playing below 800. So you can do all of those options there. So depending on what section of the song you want to listen to, this is obviously the best view for that. And as I said, you can change to a 24 dB per octave slope if you prefer that over the 12. So we can actually just stop the display while the music's playing or turn it back on. We can reset it, and we can set a sort of a latch mode so that it automatically resets. So if we turn it off, this disappears. And it will reset and disappear. But if we have it in latch, it seems to hang there for a little bit, or forever actually, by the look of it. But you can reset it as well. So we've got different displays, so you can see that if we go into single, you'll see you got this colored one here is going to be average, and the light line is going to be a peak. So we can turn them on or off, so we can get rid of the peak, keep the peak, we can get rid of the average. We can not hold it all, so that'll make it extremely dynamic. We can change our hold timer to make it longer. So it'll hold those values there for a lot longer, giving you more of an average than if you dropped it down. We can change our peak value. And we can also change our average value for how slow the average works out. Which can give you a better representation, especially if you're going into, say, a layered. In this case, you might want to get rid of the peak. Or get rid of the average. You can get a better idea of what the graphs look like compared to each other. You can also change your viewpoint here. So if we just double click, get them back all to the normal. We can change to some different views, depending on what you prefer to listen to review at. So you can see here, you can just compare critical, 50 Hertz, 150. So just some very critical moments just to see what frequencies are hitting where, at what levels. Go back to your plot there. So you can zoom in as well. You can turn the options off if you don't want them, but you can also zoom TV, but you can change the scale of it. You can set your low point and your high point, as you can see from the side here. And then you can turn it back off or turn it back on if you want. So if you want two different viewpoints, you can just toggle between them. And you can do the same with the horizontal. So you might want to zoom in. You might want to have a setting where you zoom into a certain value here. And just flick between the full mode or the zoomed in mode instantly. But you can also just quickly get back to normal, double clicking. So that'll be interesting to play with that to see if you get a nice little value there that you prefer to be able to zoom in on and see what happens there. But you can also link the values here for your filters to your zoom. So if we have that unlinked, and I just go back here, if we turn on our filters and we'll say we're concentrating on this low mids. So you can see we're seeing the whole picture here, but if you link it, we can zoom in to what we're listening to. So we've got our 800 to our 250, so we can visually compare our mix for that value. So every time I change it, we get a different view. So that's a very handy feature in itself. I like that one there. Definitely, that's really good if you're using the filters. And then you can just turn it back off to go to the full size. Okay, so that's the spectrum view. All right, so our other mode here is correlation. So correlation is basically comparing our phase. And the great thing about this one here, just looking at it, is it's doing it in frequency spectrum as well. So generally most correlation meters will just give you like this little thing over here, which gives you your average correlation, but you can't really tell where the problems are. So I guess in the regard of this is you can see certain parts of your frequency if they're out of phase or they're possibly an issue that you need to correct. So we seem to have very similar settings in regards to everything around the display and the play pause and the range and everything else. Slightly different in regards to the range, 25%, but similar, very similar settings like that. The big difference for the correlation here is these two settings here, which is the meters and the history. So it defaults to meters. So let's just have a look at that now. So if we play our song, we want our correlation to be above 0 as much as possible, heading towards the 1. If we start going down here, then we potentially have got some phasing issues. But we can see here it's pretty good. Dips down a little bit for some parts, but I don't see anything that's too much of an issue there. If we switch to our other one, can see our high sits down here, but everything else, our low end and everything is sitting up there. We've got our playback set to that there, so let's go to number 2 actually. And let's just make that a bit bigger just for the sake of it. Let's go back to our correlation. So you can see our low end here is really, you know, absolutely in phase. There's nothing moving there at all. So you'll find that's probably very mono, that section, the bass. I've got the bass very mono. And then here you got some fluctuation. But our major thing is sitting there. Now, so we've got some movement here, but nothing majorly wrong. Now, if we switch over to history, this is where we get a bit of a change in picture. So obviously getting a view of the correlation over time. And we've got some different settings here, so we can go to scroll. Or we can turn the scroll off and sort of get a collapsing style window over time. And we can reset that value as well. And we can use it with all the other settings as well, all the same settings we had before. Now, we've also got the same display screens, so we could compare the two. Now, the reason this is moving is because I've got some analog plugins on the mix, so they're probably passing noise through all the time, whereas the reference track is obviously not playing. So if we just reset that and let's just start the playback. So we can see the two together, where they're sitting in the sort of a history type graph. So this is the history of this average correlation here. So as I said, we could have it collapsing or we could have it scrolling. And then we can also change the value. And that's the value of the scrolling. We go back to our meters there, and as I said, we've got different settings here. We can have a range, which is that colored in graph, at our hold, or our average. We've obviously got nothing there. So the hold goes with the range. And again, we can change the values of these. So, you know, we can... Okay, next we've got our stereo image. So this is basically our left and right here. So we can go for our single display again. Again, same sort of settings. Okay, very similar to the last one. We don't even have any other options this time. So now we're just looking at our left and right stereo image. So we can see down here our average as it fluctuates, the entire sort of song. Hovering around that zero, moving backwards and forwards, and you can see it there. And this time we're looking at our frequencies up and down the side here. So this is our low end up to our high end. We can switch audio files. but we can also do dual or layered. So we can see if there's any frequencies there that we're not happy with the spread, whether they're too wide or not wide enough, and compare that to our reference tracks. So you can see, like here, our bass is very mono, jumps out occasionally, but it's very mono there. Then it starts to move out and starts fluctuating up this space here. This one here, we've got a little bit more movement down the bottom end and up the top as well. But we might find after doing a mastering session that we might bring that bass in a little bit and control that a little bit more so it's more mono. Next, we've got our dynamics control. So now we are looking at some dynamics. They call it PSR. So the PSR analyzes between the peak and the short-term loudness value. It's sort of, it's telling you, so you're sort of between your average and your peak, what the dynamic range is. So it's their attempt, and this value is being used a lot now in a lot of plugins, to tell you how dynamic your song is, whether it's too crushed or fairly dynamic. So what you normally do is you would set this value to what you want it to be. So they've obviously given you some values here. So, you know, you could go crushed, which is 3 dB, which is pretty ridiculous. That's going to be a loudness wars value, that one. Yeah, squashed, which is coming in more into the realms, I guess, of club music, dance music, that sort of stuff. Then loud, competitive, dynamic, and high dynamic. Again, we've got our other settings here. We can set it to scroll, auto scale. We can do our filters and we can set them to pre or post. So yeah, so depending on which setting we use here will depend on whether the dynamics is being measured pre the filters or post the filters. So we'll have a look at that in a second. So if we just start with this, so like our song here, I'll just set it to single. Obviously it's going to take some time to develop this target. You can see that's our target line. So we want it down here. You can see we've got a very dynamic mix. Now again, this is in the mix. If it was in mastering, we would see a little bit different. When I mix, I usually keep things very dynamic. So, you know, you can see there that it's sitting around there. I mean, it's not even down to this dynamic setting here. It's sitting above that. Okay, but if we switch over, you can see here this song's been mastered. And you can see the red value there is indicating that we are not sitting at high dynamic anymore. And we're pretty close to competitive, but we're a little bit in between competitive and loud, I guess. So we're hitting it a little bit more than competitive. So I would say if I customized it, we're probably targeting around 8 dB. Around 8 dB there, I think, is where we're sort of going with that one. That's a custom value. So you can set your own custom value, obviously, or you can use their predefined ones there. And this is going to give you an idea of your song, how loud it is, how competitive it is.
yeah, as I said, if I was doing this for mixing, I'd probably set it to dynamic or high, probably even more than likely high dynamic. Dynamic is okay as well. And then when we go to mastering, you're going to be sitting at dynamic if you want to go there, but more than likely I'd think you'd probably be sitting at a competitive is a good value. Now, if we go back to this one here, let's go back to highly. So if we turn the filter on, we can see we're measuring a pre-filter, so nothing's really changed there. But if we go post, we could start to see a bit of a difference. And if we set it to scroll, we might get a better view here. So we can even have a look at where our different ranges are in the dynamics here. So we can see we're very dynamic there. The highs are very dynamic. And if we switch over to our B here, and let's just get that down. So you can see our mids are pretty much dynamic. Our highs are around there. Okay, our low mids start to get a little bit more compressed. Our bass, we're starting to get a bit more compressed. And our sub is pretty dynamic as well. But then when we turn the filters off, overall, we start getting a lot less dynamic. Okay, so that is the dynamics there. So that's handy to make sure your song's sitting in the right amount of dynamics, not too crushed. And then we actually have our loudness. So again, we can use this in mixing, but probably more common to be used in mastering to get our settings right. So again, so we can put them together or have a dual, whatever you want. So we'll just set a dual at the moment, and we can set a custom LUFS level, or we can pick their default ones. So that's a funny one. Are you deaf? I like that one. If you're going to -L1 LUFS, that is probably a very appropriate question. Are you deaf? Because if you're targeting that level, I'd say the answer is probably yes. And okay, so they're using some very descriptive terms here. So square wave, if you know what a square wave is, if you sort of understand a sine wave, a square wave takes an audio signal and basically chops the top off and makes it flat. So if you are targeting -2 LUFS, you have basically chopped the top off all your audio and you are going to have a square looking mix. And -3, we've got can't breathe. And -4, we've got death magnetic. And if you know anything about the loudness wars, this is in reference to the Metallica album, Death Magnetic, where it was mastered so loudly that it was distorting extremely and people complained about it, and it is now used as an example of what you should not do when you are mastering music. So we've got some nice little humorous descriptions of their presets there, really loud, and now we're getting down to some more sensible one here, and obviously some useful ones. So if you need to adhere to some regulations, some broadcasting regulations, or you want a podcast, dynamic pre-master, if you want to master this song to the Tidal platform, or iTunes Radio, Spotify, YouTube, you can do all of those. So whether you use all of these or any of these depends on whether you do multiple masters for different play locations, or whether you just do a general master to suit all and just find a right in-between value that's going to work pretty well for most platforms. And that's generally what you do most of the time, but some people do like to do masters for every single platform to make sure that they're getting the best quality out of each. So if we just go competitive for the moment, we've got it on meters. So you can see our values come up here. So obviously our mix here is well under. You can see our master is in the red, and that was because, as I said, it was mastered louder than dynamic. But if we put it to loud master, we're sitting pretty good. You can see that peaks into the red occasionally, but our average is nice for a loud master. So that's what I'm saying. If you look at the values there, we're in between a loud master and a competitive. So we're sitting about -9 LUFS on average. So we can layer them. Obviously our values here, so you can see them back to back. Again, going to be more useful in a mastering state. Or we can just look at one or the other, side by side. And we can also do a history graph here again, so we can change our scale, auto scale, whatever. We could layer it. So we could turn scroll off, and we could see a history of the entire song. So we could reset it. But we can also link it as well, so that'll stop. And so you can see there, that feature there is quite useful in this case, because you can see that it's still ticking over and it's still calculating, even though nothing's happening. I'm not playing anything. Hit play, it'll start adjusting again. But that one there, see, with that setting on, it pauses because it's locked to the DAW, so it's sort of pausing and then starts again. And we can change between our different settings. So we've got it set to the integrated. We could move over to the short term. Oh, sorry, we can show any one of these. So we can show the short term. We can show just the momentary, or we can show all of them. Okay, so there you go. There's the Metric AB plugin from ADPTR. Hopefully you liked it. Let me know what you think. Let me know whether you are tempted to purchase this plugin or not, or if you have your own reference plugin that you prefer and don't want to change for a particular reason, or didn't like what you saw about this plugin. So let me know. Obviously, as I said, we can't be judging that on price at the moment, but it depends on when you're watching this video. There's a good chance that the plugin's been released when you get a chance to watch this video, so you'll probably have a very good idea of what the price is and whether it's worth it. Since I don't know what the price is at the recording of this video, I can't make a judgment on whether I want to purchase this plugin or not from that regard. So I will be keen to see what that price is, and then make my own decision on this plugin. So anyway, try out the demo. I always advise that you demo software before you purchase if possible, because what I like, what I don't like is not necessarily going to be in line with you, because different plugins work differently for different people. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many different styles of plugins. So, you've got to find the right one for your workflow, the right one for your DAW, the right one for what you want to get out of it. And it doesn't always line up with everybody else's opinion. So listen to other people's opinions, but then obviously try them out for yourself and make your own judgment on what you're looking for and what you think is good. So hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.